And now here in my case, at the point of time I'm recording this, it's then asking me to specify what I want AutoGPT to do. Now, a couple of weeks, or I guess even days ago, it instead wanted to get a list of goals. In a few weeks, it might again ask for slightly other things here. But in the end, as mentioned, it's always about defining a goal. And then AutoGPT will try to derive steps to reach that goal, and it will perform these steps, and it will even be able to search the internet, access websites to gather information, and also store its output in files. And here, for this first basic introduction, I'll simply say, I want AutoGPT to write a short article about the evolution of GPT models. But you can, of course, come up with anything you want. I'll just say right away that, as mentioned earlier, AutoGPT definitely still has its bugs and flaws, and it can fail. It will definitely not be able to achieve all the tasks you're giving it, but playing around with it can be a lot of fun, and it will be quite interesting to see how this tool will evolve over the next months. It might become a super important and helpful AI tool in the future, which is why we're including it here in this course. So with that here, I'll just hit enter. And now AutoGPT will, in the end, send this input to these GPT models, enhanced with some extra instructions, which we can't see here, which are encoded in its code base. And it will then use these models to come up with a list of tasks or sub-goals, which it then also tries to execute. So here, for example, it derived a role, it should assume, with help of those GPT models based on the goal we gave it. And then it derived some sub-goals based on our main goal here. And again, the exact output and format of this output might change, but that's how it generally works. Now it then goes ahead and tries to execute. And it always lets us know what it thinks, why it thinks that, what its plan is, and some self-reflective thoughts about the plan. And of course, here you'll therefore find a lot of the things you learned about in the prompt engineering section. It's self-reflective, it uses the laddering technique to split up a problem into multiple smaller steps. It actually already did this here. And just to be clear, it's of course not using magic here under the hood. Instead, it used those GPT models, so the same technology that is used by ChatGPT, to in the end produce this output. It sent prompts to these models behind the scenes to get these GPT models to produce this output, this output, this output, and this output. There simply were multiple prompts behind the scenes sent by this tool. So here it lets us know what it plans to do next, and it now needs your input before it goes ahead and executes these steps. And this input is required because, of course, as mentioned behind the scenes, a lot of prompts are being sent to those GPT models. It's doing a lot of things behind the scenes, and it's of course you with your OpenAI API key who's paying for all this work. And therefore, of course, it's asking you whether you want to proceed before it does that, because if it would execute a super complex task that involves dozens or maybe even hundreds of prompts with a lot of text being sent back and forth behind the scenes, that could cost you a lot. Which is why you should also be careful about using this tool, and why you should regularly log into your OpenAI account and take a look at your billing page there to find out if you're still within your spending limits. Now here we could either type an N and hit enter to exit the program if we don't want to execute these steps. We can type Y for yes to execute the next step it has. So in this case here, it wants to perform a web research in the internet. And you can also type yes and then dash and then any number of your choice, like 5 or 10, to not just allow this step, but also the next 5 or 10 or 2 or 3 steps. so that you don't have to manually confirm those steps, but you can instead send it off to do its work without constantly looking at it. And you can do this if you're happy with it just going through the next couple of steps on its own. And I did this here. I entered Y-3 separated by a white space to not just accept this next step here, this one, but also the next steps thereafter. So here it then in the end just performed a web search on Google, as you can see, and it's now probably going to visit some of these websites and then take a look at their content and use these GPT models to summarize the content to, in the end, hopefully produce a result for the task I gave it, which is to write a short article about the evolution of GPT models. Now, of course, this will take a while. It now finished the first step, came up with thoughts, reasoning, and a plan for the next step. So here I'll just let it do its thing, and I can actually see that it's already writing to a file, so looks like it's already done with its research. It already did take a look at the output returned by Google here, and also wrote to a file as it seems, but it then also continues its research here in my case. And I'll therefore just let it do its thing and get back to you once it looks like I have a more final result. And it will definitely take some time for that. And from time to time, depending on how many tasks and steps you authorized in advance, if any, it will ask you for more input again, because you will have to confirm the next task or step again. And you can, of course, authorize multiple steps in one go then, if you want to. But you should also be careful that it can indeed enter infinite loops. I have seen this happen before in the past, just as I have seen cases that don't make a lot of sense. And you should therefore always keep an eye on the things it's doing and not authorize too many steps in advance so that you're not paying for a super long infinite task. It is still a tool that's evolving and it might become super powerful in the next couple of months, but at the moment it can definitely still produce wrong results, perform steps that don't make sense, or enter infinite loops. And you therefore, of course, want to quit the program if it seems like that's happening. Now, indeed, here in my case, it keeps on going, and it does perform different steps and visit different websites. It even downloaded a report at one point and had a look at that, which of course also could be dangerous if it accidentally downloads a file from a malicious website that executes that. And then here in my case, it also keeps on summarizing its finding and keeps on writing those findings to files. And it always tells you where those files can be found. So in my case here, in a subfolder of this AutoGPT folder, to be precise, in this AutoGPT subfolder. So this folder is also called AutoGPT. And then in there in the AutoGPT workspace. And here, after running for a couple of minutes, in my case here, and performing many different steps, it already wrote to a couple of files. And of course, that will very likely be totally different if you're using this tool, even if you gave it exactly the same goal. It's also not done here in my case, it's waiting for more input, but here at this point I will stop this process by typing in N and hitting enter, and I'll then close this terminal. But now I can see that I got a couple of files in there, and we can take a look at these files. For example, the history article file isn't too impressive in my case. The history info is interesting though, it tells me in which years which GPT version was released. And I got another history file with some text instead of a bullet list. I got an outline of an article it wanted to write. I got some strengths and weaknesses. And these can, of course, all be very useful results, which also take recent data into account and recent publications, because this tool is able to search the web. It's not limited to its training data, it's that it can search the web and therefore also include recent data and recent information into its results. It did all these things automatically, and that of course can save you some time if it's doing that whilst you're doing something else. And even if you then have to refine the results it produced, it may still have saved you quite a bit of time.